You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
So our Super Rugby finalists are locked in then. The Blues.
Picks it up and then he's taken in a tackle and it's been intercepted by Mark Talia. Good night, Mark Talia from 40 out.
The Chiefs.
He's a half a metre short. The Chiefs pour in. They're trying to get across the line. They're claiming a try. Try Chiefs! Try Chiefs! 75 minutes gone. 27-20.
The Crusaders.
Opportunity at the left. Jordan and reaches out and scores.
And the Brumbies.
5 metres out. 50 in from the left wing touch. They go the shots on again. Injected themselves. And the Brumbies score in the corner.
So just repeating, the Crusaders play the Blues in Christchurch Friday night. The Chiefs will play the Brumbies in Hamilton Saturday night. And for just the second time in Super Rugby history, I'm told, we've got a repeat of the same teams from the previous year's semi-finals. The Crusaders, Chiefs, Blues and Brumbies were our semi-finalists last year and again this year. That also happened in 2005 and 2006 when the Hurricanes, the Waratahs, the Crusaders and the Bulls were back-to-back semi-finalists. Let's bring in our rugby editor and head of all things rugby at News Talk ZB, Elliott Smith. Elliott, thanks for joining us, mate. Did you think that was a try at the end of the Canes-Brumbies game?
I thought it probably was, Piney, but when you send the decision up, as Nick Berry did with a no try, and the evidence on the video screens had nothing to overturn us, I think it was only going to go one way. And vice versa, if he'd sent it up as a try, it probably would have been upheld as well. My gut feeling was that it was a try, and Artie said as much post-match, and you can see the reactions of the players, and sometimes you know when there's a try, and it certainly seemed like from their reactions that for the briefest of seconds or the barest of grass that had touched just a second. But ultimately, I think there wasn't enough to overturn Nick Berry's on-field decision, and that's a real heartbreaker for the Hurricanes to go out on a decision like that in what was it, the 85th minute to end their campaign in the quarterfinals. I'm
not sure whether you can answer this or not, but what would have made a referee like Nick Berry say, well, my on-field decision is no try, compared to saying my on-field decision is he scored the try?
Well, I think that's only what he's seen with his vision, and if he had to make a call without a TMO, there was no TMO there. If he was refereeing, club game on the weekend or whatever it might be, his gut feeling would have been that it was, no try and it had been held up. He was in relatively good position to have a look at that, and he couldn't see it. There was a massive bodies. Of course, so he didn't think there was a grounding, and he was looking pretty close in there to see if he could find one. So I guess he goes back to the old eyes and what he can see on the park, and he couldn't see grounding even for just a millisecond. So yeah, tough one, as I say, for the Canes to take, and that's their season done.
In a wider sense, do you think the Brumbies deserve to win the game?
I think they probably did. I thought they played really well in the first half, especially, and just kept building. The strike plays were really good. I thought they pretty much scored in the same fashion 3 times in that first half, and were able to catch the Hurricanes unaware there. They took a comfortable-ish lead into half-time, and then perhaps that was the difference in the end. The way they played in the first spell, the Hurricanes had to play a bit of catch-up footy in the second spell and did very well at doing that. That wonderful long-range try to Devon Flanders was utterly superb, and the Hurricanes put their noses back in front, but ultimately the Brumbies probably got there on the basis of what they did in the first half and maybe the way they were able to close out their game at the end. Given the defensive stand, given that we're talking about a grounding, if it was only for milliseconds, the Brumbies held their line, albeit with a couple of infringements, for 4 or 5 minutes of added time. So I do think the Brumbies won, or deserved to win rather, and probably on the basis of the 80 minutes, they were just maybe the better team than the Hurricanes.
So could the Brumbies go to Hamilton next weekend and beat the Chiefs?
Well, if we combine what we've seen from that Chiefs-Reds game and also what we saw from the Brumbies last night, I think they go with a chance, absolutely. I think the Chiefs were rattled a wee bit by the Reds. They weren't able to play the game that we've seen so often from them this season, where they can be so devastating on the counter-attack. It was 3 tries to 2 in the end to the Reds, and the Reds, I thought, were defensively really, really strong. It was the infringement that probably cost the Chiefs, the Reds in the end a chance there. We've seen what the Brumbies can do. They're very, very good at accumulating on the scoreboard, putting scoreboard pressure. A number of teams have felt that pressure so far this year, and they don't mind a high-scoring game either. Last night, what was 37-33, I think, in the end. We'll see other games this year where they have been high-scoring. Their defence has held strong, but they've also been really, really good on the counter and been able to strike that way. So I think they go in to the Trans-Tasman trip next week. History's not on their side in terms of Australian teams winning playoff games in New Zealand, but I think they have the game that can frustrate the Chiefs, and we saw the Reds do that, frustrate them to an extent last night. If the Brumbies can do that again, they go on with a chance of turning this competition on its head next weekend.
Clayton McMillan, after the game, described it as a kickathon. What did you make of all the kicking in that game?
Well, I thought I think the Reds kicked quite well for the majority of the game, and their 50-22s, they saw that as a tactical option where they could pin the Chiefs into the area of the park that they wanted to play and have some attacking ball there. They used that as a real weapon, and I think that's something the New Zealand teams, by and large, struggle to do with it. They haven't seen too many 50-22s from New Zealand teams so far this year. I thought the Chiefs didn't kick overly well, if I'm honest. They were searching, I thought, for attacking sort of plays from their kicks, dinky kicks over the top that sometimes didn't come to fruition, when sometimes keeping the ball in hand might have been the better option. It was a sunny afternoon in Hamilton, late afternoon in Hamilton. I felt some of that kicking got rather aimless from the Chiefs, and perhaps they got drawn into the aerial battle that the Reds wanted them to, and perhaps they got sucked in a little bit that way. That's something they need to be on guard next week against the Brumbies, because the Brumbies would have noticed that, and they've got some great kickers that can also execute 50-22s over the park. So I think the Chiefs will want to discard some of that kicking that really didn't work for them in the basis of that game, and I think the Reds, while they didn't win, showed a wee bit of a game plan for opposition teams that the Chiefs can be a bit vulnerable that way. Yeah.
By contrast to that fairly narrow victory for the Chiefs, the Crusaders made very, very short work of the Fijian Drua down in Christchurch, 49 points to 8. How do you assess where the Crusaders are for a tilt at yet another Super Rugby title?
Well, they're where they want to be, aren't they? They know their way to the title, don't they, the Crusaders, from this point of the season. The injury tolls really, really hammered them this year, and Ethan Blackadder going off last night. Richie Mwonga, I think they ended the game with 13 as far as I could tell, counting on watching TV late in the game. So that's going to be a real factor for them over the last couple of weeks, having cattle in the right positions. But last night they executed well, I thought, in the opening 15 or so minutes, building that 21-0 lead. I don't think they'll be overly happy with the last hour or so of the game, where they sort of drifted in and out of it. They didn't play a lot of rugby that they would have liked. It was rather messy for periods of the game, and we saw that against the Hurricanes last week, that the Hurricanes were able to roll out their game plan and frustrate the Crusaders, and the Drua were doing likewise. They were frustrating the Crusaders. They were making forcing them to handling errors throughout the latter part of the contest. Even when the game was gone, the Crusaders are very, very good at building scores, and it felt like it remained quite static for a while, despite the fact that the game was probably gone. The Crusaders would have liked to kick on probably more than they did. So, Scott Robertson, I know, said last week that they had landed some punches, but not a full combination. Again, I don't think they landed that full combination last night. The Blues coming to visit next week. They're a team the Crusaders always rise for, and vice versa as well. But the Crusaders are probably, barring the injury toll they've got, right where they want to be, 2 games away from the title. They know their way to that championship, don't they? So I think they approach it the way they always do, and these are the big games they rise for.
And what of the Blues, Elliott? You've watched them all season. You called their win over the Waratahs on Friday night, 41-12, a fairly comfortable victory in their quarter-final. Could the Blues go to Christchurch and beat the Crusaders?
Oh, they could. They've got the attacking weapons, and we haven't quite seen the Blues of the 2022 vintage, where they dropped the opening game of the season, dropped the last game of the season, of course, as we well know, but went unbeaten through that rest of that stretch of that season, and were really, really impressive. We haven't seen that from them this year. I wonder whether we will. But they're a chance of going to Christchurch. I think back a few weeks ago where the Crusaders won 15-3. Well, they scored one of their tries in that very, very low-scoring game, shouldn't have been allowed. And they don't score that. The Blues are right in the contest. The Crusaders rise to the defensive occasion, don't they, against the Blues and frustrate them. We've seen that time and time again. They did it in last year's final. They're very, very good at suffocating this Blues team. The Blues need to find a way to unlock their stars against this Crusaders defence. Mark Kalea, for example, Rico Ioane, Bowden Barrett as well. How do they find a way through this Crusaders defence, which seems to know which step they'll take next, which pass they're going to make next? They seem to have their number. They can draw on that win they had down there in Christchurch last year, but it's all very well doing it in regular season. The Crusaders have shown that when they meet the Blues in the big games, the big moments, that they've been able to rise again since that occasion. And, one win in Christchurch since 2004 doesn't make for pretty reading. But again, they've got the attacking weapons, and Mark Kalea has really come into his own again in the back end of the Super Rugby season. They need to find a way for him to be influential on Friday night.
Yeah, indeed, because it is such a record the Crusaders have fashioned in Super Rugby finals games at home. Unbeaten in Super Rugby finals games at home in 25 years, it says here. 29 straight wins back to 1998. Why can't a team win a knockout game in Christchurch?
Yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable record, isn't it? You think of the kind of teams that have gone to Christchurch over the years and not being able to come away. There's some great South African teams. The Sharks in the late 90s weren't able to do it. There's been good, very, very good Brumbies sides that have been beaten in finals, Waratahs teams as well that haven't been able to do it, and that's also accounting for some very good Chiefs and other New Zealand sides in recent years that haven't been able to do it. History does mean a lot, and the Crusaders have shown that they can rise, especially at home, to the big occasion, and that's a daunting record to try and break, especially if you're the Blues. I mean, they take probably a wee bit of confidence that they could do it last year when they hadn't won in 18 years. But as I say, it's all very well doing in a regular season, but to try and knock off that finals record that the Crusaders so proudly hold is another matter entirely.
All right, just before you go, great news this week that you'll be leading our commentary live from France for Rugby World Cup 2023. All Blacks games will be live here on News Talk ZB with you behind the mic. You must be looking forward to what everybody is saying, and I'm sure you'll agree will be one of the most competitive Rugby World Cups we've ever seen.
Piney, absolutely can't wait. Very much looking forward to going over there and bringing the action to News Talk ZB listeners from over there. And you're right, it's a wide open Rugby World Cup. We talked a lot about this quarterfinal mix, the probable quarterfinal mix, I should say, because there's pool games to get through. But France, Ireland, All Blacks, South Africa, 2 of those 4 teams will be going home. Up to quarterfinal weekend, quite remarkable. Scotland's also in the mix in that South Africa-Ireland pool as well. They'll have something to say. And then, there's all sorts of other storylines, aren't there? England's got a new coach in recent times, Eddie Jones coming into Australia on the other side of the draw. I really do think that any number of 5 or 6 teams could win this Rugby World Cup, maybe even more. Argentina have gone a wee bit under the radar. Just thinking about them the other day, they've got Michael Cheika at the helm. He's a very, very good tournament coach. They pulled off that win against the All Blacks in Christchurch last year. They've got a relatively straightforward draw. They've got England and other challenges to face there, but they could be a bit of a smoky when it comes to it, and throw them in the mix of 6 or 7 teams perhaps that can lift the trophy. I can't wait for the tournament. I think it's going to be maybe the best World Cup yet. Yeah, look, I hope so. Less than 13 weeks until the opening game, the All Blacks up against France. Elliott, thanks for your comprehensive wrap of Super Rugby quarterfinal action. We'll look forward to seeing how the semis play out next weekend. Thanks for taking the time. Anytime, Piney. Cheers, mate. Thank you, mate. That's Elliott Smith, our lead rugby commentator and rugby editor. Yeah, News Talk ZB and Gold Sport have secured the audio broadcasting rights to Rugby World Cup 2023 in France. You're going to hear every All Blacks game in the tournament on air or through iHeartRadio. Elliott Smith will lead the team live from France. And the 10th edition of Rugby World Cup kicks off Saturday, September 9 at New Zealand time. The All Blacks up against France in Paris. What an opening game to the 2023 Rugby World Cup.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.